Okay, we are back, and we are now going to continue with this very important lesson on investigating grievances. As I said, one of the things which is very, very helpful and very, very dangerous today is the incredible spread of new technology. Once upon a time, when you had a grievance and a dispute in the workplace or about how you were treating a passenger, it was a he said, she said. And often it was very, very difficult to prove. Today, as I said in the previous session, with technology, almost everything is recorded, for better or for worse. If you work on a computer, you leave tracks. If you're on a bus, there may be a video camera. A customer or a rider may have documentation of something. And so you need to know, as you begin to prepare the grievance, what do you have? So you need to read the article, Big Brother and Grievances, because it explains what you can use in a grievance and what you may have to ask for from the company. And they are legally obligated to provide this information to you if you request it. But you've got to have it ahead of time. And this is a kind of a thing that technology uses. Video camera surveillance. We are all familiar with that. And this is sometimes official and sometimes informal by people taking pictures with their camera phones. Spyware software. That is, if you work in the call center or in an office, anything that you do could be recorded through the company or the employer's computer system. So if you are going to access private sites or you're going to do personal emails from work or online betting or even worse, don't. And this is something that you need to tell your members up front. You need to explain to new hires when they come in that a software system is in place that will surveil what they do. And so they need to be aware of that at all times. Another thing that has happened is that other workers often observe employees. I've had experience of seeing people in a public area accessing pornographic sites. And clearly, if you do this at work, you're in trouble. As I said, there's desktop monitoring software. It may even connect to an employee's PC if you're using the company's email address, the log files, and the phone recording. But as I said, often don't do things and tell your members don't do things which are not smart. I had a steward, not from the ATU, but from another class, who liked to post Facebook greetings to people. And she would show a picture of herself and she would say, "Good morning, world. I hope everybody's doing great and I hope we're all happy." And she would post it on her personal Facebook site, but she was sitting in the office with a clock directly behind her which showed that she was on work time. And this is something that you could be disciplined for. And so just don't do it. And unfortunately for the woman, the evidence is right there because the time is there. And so just tell your members, be careful, be aware, they're not at home. And there are lots of examples in grievances of employees doing stuff from work that gets them in trouble later. This is an example of, you can read it on the documents here, of a crash and the increasing use of cameras by the Philadelphia SEPTA system, the Public Transit Authority, to look at what's happening. In a crash in Philadelphia, they are now requiring that the member's cell phone records be provided. And they're trying to figure out if the guy was on the phone when the crash happened. And so these are things that you really are dangerous. We've seen a Serena Williams, a famous tennis player, was involved in a fatal automobile crash. They're requesting her cell phone to see if she was talking or texting while she was supposed to be driving. So don't underestimate the importance of electronic surveillance. It can hurt you. It can also help you. This is an example, I'm just throwing this in to kind of spice things up, of what happened by a union member who was constantly reporting harassment, sexual harassment, from a manager at the River Rouge plant in Detroit. And the company absolutely refused to believe it. They said, you have no proof. It's a he said, she said. They move women to different plants to try and cover it up. But here, finally, a young woman recorded this guy on her phone, telling her that she would give her overtime if she engaged in a sexual act with him. She turned it in, and they couldn't cover it up any longer, and they fired him. But this is the kind of electronic documentation that you need to know about. As we record these steward training classes, there's a case going on about a Miami Dolphins receiver having a girlfriend problem, domestic violence, but she has videos of it. And so you cannot get away from this kind of very, very important documentation. So when you do your fact sheet, ask for it. And so, as I said, one of the things which will be happened, you will be talking to your members about being safe, about not using the company equipment, about being thoughtful about what they do during workplace. When we get to session 11, we'll be talking about your personal behavior. But here are some tips I'm going to give you right now. As a union steward, do not use the company's email address or any of their systems for sending or receiving information, other than something that you may get as a request from management. Do not use the company's telephone system or their texting system to investigate this grievance, because you may be using company time, which is not authorized, and put yourself in trouble. But also, they will look at everything that you're getting. And there may be stuff in here which hurts your case that you don't necessarily want to have it made public, and you don't want them to know about it, but they'll get it. Never send union messages to a member's company address or phone. As soon as you start filling out the fact sheet, as soon as you start talking about potential grievances, get the person's personal contact information and stay with that. Again, I want to stress the importance of evaluating the credibility of any witness from either side. Does the witness have a personal interest in the situation? Does the person have a grudge within the workplace? These are things you need to know. You don't necessarily have to describe them to the company, but you want to be able to tell your other stewards, yes, this is a person we can count on as a witness. This is a person we can't count on as a witness. As I said, you may turn up some information that's unpleasant, but doing it early in the investigation saves you a lot of trouble down the road and gets you away from mistakes that could happen. All right, the one thing that you want to do as you're evaluating is to avoid what we call the unwelcome surprise. And this is something that every steward has been through, every officer has been through at one time, and that's how you learn to carefully fill out your fact sheet. Because what happens is you will go into a meeting with management and they will give you information that you wish you had known before. It has a very, very negative impact on your particular case. And so that makes you look bad as a steward. It makes you look like you were sloppy. And this is not good, because it hurts your credibility with your own members and with your employer. Because if your employer thinks that you come in with every wild-eyed rumor, they're not going to take it seriously. And what you want to do is to make them focus on the cases that are important. And you want to have your members understand that what you're doing is very important for defending the union and not just chasing fantasies around the workplace. The other thing is, you look back at the original documents on the organizing model. And the organizing model says we are going to try to build the union. And so as you look to fill out your fact sheet, you also need to be considering different strategies for winning the situation. These strategies will become more familiar to you as you gain experience, but don't be just a lawyer. Don't just file a grievance under the narrow language of the contract and figure if you don't win it at this step, you'll pass it along and maybe it'll go to arbitration. That's a bad strategy. You need to be an organizer. You need to figure out what leverage you can develop to move the situation in the union's favor. You need to be proactive. As I said, in the servicing model of unionism, the union is reactive. That is, nobody does anything, not a steward, not a chief steward, not an officer, until the company does something or management does something and a member comes to you with a complaint. What you want to do is be proactive. You want to go around the workplace, and we'll be talking about this later in this session, to create grievances. That is, are there situations that your members are unhappy about? How can you create a grievance to try and get these talked about and resolved in the union's favor? You want to be proactive in terms of informing your members about pending grievances so that they know what happens or what's going on. And we're going to be talking later in this session about creating a communication network. That is, ways that you can tell your members what's going on in their union. And as I said before, it's using electronic communications on their personal emails, their personal phones, their personal apps, so that no company can get in the way and surveil what you do or block what you do. You also want to be proactive down the road in publicizing your victories. That is, when the union wins a grievance or settles a grievance successfully, you want your members to know about it. Because, as I said, this is a very, very important part of the union. And if you're out doing organizing, you will know that many companies will try to pay what the union people get. But the whole question of the rights under the contract, the fair treatment, the elimination of discrimination is as important to non-union workers as the pay when they're talking about joining the ATU. One of the things which is important as you publicize your victories is you don't gloat, because your management that you win from today, you're going to be dealing with tomorrow, and you don't want to create grudges and bad feelings. Being proactive means looking for leverage, and leverage we've talked about is very, very important. It's how you get the boss to do what they don't want to do. And it can be different types of grievances, that can be demonstrations, that can be bringing in the riders, that can be looking for people above the level of management who can influence what you do. But most importantly, you want to think new thoughts. You want to sit down and think, with the material I have, how can I make it as strong as possible? And it's often not what you have done before, but it's something that's the most important thing for building the union. One of the things which is important is that you have a grievance file. You have to keep track of a history so that you know if a grievance like this has happened before. And one of the most important challenges for ATU stewards, particularly in big locals, is that the stewards don't communicate with each other as much as they should, or the chief steward doesn't. So that you have a grievance in one workplace, in one department, or in one location which is settled, and other stewards don't know about it. And so when you have the same grievance, you don't know what the history of it is. You also want to make sure that you keep track of all the documentation from this particular grievance. Save the fact sheet. Save your notes. Save any other information that you have. If you file a grievance, keep a new folder with a grievance in it. And remember, if you have steps in your grievance procedure, a chief steward, for example, or a local president may be handling the grievance. and you want to give them as much information as possible so that they can use it and be successful. One other thing that you want to try to do to resolve your case, if you can, is to meet informally with a supervisor. Before you file the grievance, do it so you can see what their case is. What do they want to do? Is there a way to avoid, for example, a serious discipline situation? What are you going to need to have to block them from doing it? What evidence will you need? Because you want to see what their case is, and the more you know about it, the better positioned you're going to be to create your case and to figure out what kind of leverage you have to have. And clearly then you want to find out other conflicts in the stories between what your member is telling you and what your boss is saying happened. And these are very, very important. And it may mean going back and talking to witnesses. It may mean finding new witnesses. It may be talking to your member again and refreshing his or her memory, because often they will conveniently leave stuff out that the boss will say that you should know. And again, this keeps you from those unwelcome surprises down the road. Even if you're not required to meet informally, it's a good idea to do so. And sometimes you'll be dealing with the same supervisor, the same human resources person, the same personnel director, and you can develop a relationship where they will tell you what's going on. And often they will hear different stories from their managers. For example, if a manager is harassing a member and the member files a grievance, the manager is not going to admit to it. The manager will claim that the employee is a bad worker or is unreliable, and human resources may need to hear what the truth really is. You can also articulate to them how the behavior of certain people in the company is affecting your members, and so they can take steps to change that. One of the things which is very important, as I said, is to meet informally to see whether or not a grievance is necessary. But be careful of your time limits. And it's because once you find out about the situation, you may have a limited amount of time to do it. And when we talk about personal areas for the stewards, we're going to be looking at how you manage your time. Can you get time off? What about if you're on a run? What if you're out of town? All of these things are issues that the union has to deal with and that you have to deal with. And again, these are all part of preparation. And preparation is so important. So we're going to let you take another break now, and we're going to come back with issues on how the union structure deals with filing a grievance and how you deal with the duty of fair representation.